There was a man.
He went to San Francisco by himself when he was young. He was imprisoned 3 times, had 4 wives in different periods, became a hero 5 times, and won court cases 6 times. He had 8 sons, more than 40 grandsons and granddaughters. The man settled down in North America and lived up to 100 years old before he passed away peacefully, surrounded by his extended family and offsprings. Please welcome the 8 young Chinese Americans who will tell this heroic tale.
Hello everyone, welcome to Tang's Restaurant. My name is Grace Kai. I'm 15 years old living in Massachusetts, and I'm going to share this story with you. Brandon brought back good news. Teresa was being protected by Maria's church sisters. Moreover, Teresa also asked Brandon to bring her a hairpin. This is the love gift that Gunma gave to Teresa. When Gunma was studying in private school, he liked to memorize Zhuangzi's Xiao Yao Yu, especially when he mentioned in the opening chapter, there is a fish in the northern underworld named Kun. It turns into a bird, and its name is Pun. Flying in anger, the water hits 3,000 miles, and the one who swings up is 90,000 miles. The younger brother Li Genlong, however, likes Confucius' Analects of Confucius. Motto to better yourself, improve your familial harmony, rule your country wisely, and bring peace to the world. Juzo also sewed a bird-shaped sachet for Gunma. He hoped that Juzo would be a fish, and he would be a big bird, flying 90,000 miles high. The bird and the fish were originally one body, and the flying bird was transformed from the fish so that the two would never be separated. The happy Gunma took down the sachet and asked Brandon to give it to Juzo. He asked Brandon to tell Juzo that he would go back to Jinghan to see her as soon as he was paid at the end of the month, and then the two would plan to do what they want in the future. Gunma didn't notice Brandon's complicated expression, and he sincerely said that he would also help Brandon with the word he liked in the future. Brandon blurted out, "I like Juzo." Gunma hesitated for a moment and said carelessly, "Okay, no problem." Brandon knows that Juzo and Amma are in love. He is bitter and jealous of Amma. In order to see Juzo, he said that he must send gifts. In fact, he had long wanted to give Juzo a special gift. Maria heard from Juzo that some girls who came with her were forced to sign a prostitution contract with Akbar. Isn't that forcing the girls to be slaves? Laws in the United States would not allow that. It was clear that her rescue team had a lot to do. During this time, she taught Juzo to learn English, read the Bible, and volunteer. When Gunma was paid at the end of the month and was about to take the Jishan train to see Juzo the next day, the workers in Sam's group suddenly developed diarrhea, fever, back pain, headache, and weaknesses. Then, the Chinese workers in Charlie's and Jim's groups developed body rashes. Oh no! The smallpox plague broke out at the railway construction site, and engineers and construction heads hid in the train cabins and dared not come out. Some of the Chinese workers fell to the ground and died. When the board of directors was informed, they asked all workers to stay where they were and not be allowed to enter the city. The company sent sanitation personnel to disinfect each tent and shack, and the work stopped again. Many of Alan's white workers also fell ill. He accused these unhygienic Chinese workers who brought smallpox in extreme anger. Gunma was irritated by what he heard, and he couldn't help but instinctively scolded Alan across the tent. The engineer told Alan to shut up, and told him the common sense about smallpox. The earliest recorded smallpox was in ancient Egypt. At the time of the 15th century, after European colonists came to the American continent, they gave the blankets used by smallpox patients to the Indians. As a result, the number of 20 to 30 million indigenous people here had been reduced to 1 million all at once. Then mumps, measles, cholera, and yellow fever spread. It was not until 1820 that the vaccine against smallpox was developed in England. But the mortality rate for smallpox patients was still as high as 1/3, which was why it was such a horror when smallpox was mentioned. When the incidence of smallpox at the railway construction site spread to Jinshan, relatives were restless. Jesus saw Abba treat smallpox patients before. Abba said that there was no smallpox in China before. It was during the Eastern Han Dynasty. The captives from the war with Vietnam spread the smallpox virus in China and then on. About 25% of the people with the Great Pox died. 12% of the people with moderate smallpox died, and only 1% of people with smallpox died. Juzha prayed that the Chinese workers were only infected with smallpox. She told Maria that she wanted to go to the construction site and try traditional Chinese medicine remedies, which might be able to save the Chinese workers. Maria was also thinking about her husband on the construction site, and she was so anxious that she asked, what should she do? Juzha said that it has been a week, and some patients have already seen acne. She was going to take out 20 to 30 crusted acne particles from them, grind them into fine powder, and then mix with 3 or 5 drops of clean water. She was going to spread cotton into thin sheets to wrap the vaccine, pinch it into the size of a jujube stone, tie it with a thread, and stuff it into the patient's nostril for 12 hours. Fever and acne appeared in about 7 days, and she can avoid continued infection. Maria couldn't understand what she was saying, but she said Juzha couldn't be on the site. Juzha firmly said, I must go. I can't care about that now. Moreover, if Gunma was not infected, he can still help her. Maria found a carriage and went to the construction site with Juzha, regardless of her own danger. She brought some Western pills. She was not only worried about continued death, but also did not want to let her husband's project suffer more damage. She loved her husband. Juzha disguised as a man and entered the train carriage at the construction site. Engineers found Gunma, who had no symptoms of infection. He recognized Juzha and was so excited, but Juzha only signaled him to be his assistant. They covered their mouths with sterilized towels and successfully removed pimples from the patients, which were then inserted into the patient's nostrils. After 12 hours of work, they didn't even get to have a private moment. Juzha and Maria didn't dare to stay any longer and hurried back to Jinshan. A week later, good news came back from the construction site. The epidemic disappeared, and the Chinese worker who received the acne was rescued. But when Maria returned home, she was infected with smallpox. Juzha also used the same method to pick up pimples from Maria, although she survived, but there were still many pockmarks in her face. After her recovery, Maria came to church with the veil on her head, only to find that Juzha was missing. It turned out that while Maria was covering at home, Akwe came back to the basement of the church with his bodyguards and took Juzha back to the Lulua tea house. The Gunma brothers put together $500 and came for Juzha's redemption again. But the well-prepared security guards not only stole the ransom, but also injured the brothers, tied them up, and threatened to chop off their hands and feet. Akwe held a gun and wanted to have a duel with Gunma. He said that he would marry Juzha because she was already pregnant with Akwe's child. Amal didn't believe it. Akwe asked Juzha to speak for himself. Juzha was frightened when he saw the gun in Akwe's hand. She didn't want to hurt Gunma's brother, so she nodded tearfully and asked Gunma's brothers to leave quickly, and swore that the fate was broken and they would never see each other again. Gunma was desperate. He was dragged away by the elder brother. Akwe really fell in love with Juzha, knelt down like the whites, and proposed to Juzha to marry him. He begged her to leave Jinsha and go to the east coast with him. For Juzha, he is willing to live in a new place. If Juzha did not agree, he would kill the Gunma brothers. In order to save the Gunma brothers, Juzha agreed to go with Akwe. Akwe took Juzha and disappeared from Chinatown overnight. Gunma continued to build the railway in no vain of finding Juzha. Since the railways on the east and west sides were soon to be closed, the railway company paid the Chinese workers to let them leave, leaving only a few elite Chinese workers to complete the railway's last section. The Chinese workers became great talents of railway construction at the time, and participated in the construction of more than 70 railways in the US. But there were also many Chinese workers who went home to be with their family, and some soon brought their families to Jinshan to open restaurants and laundries. The elder brother Genshin didn't want to stay for a moment, so he went home. Gunma stayed. He wanted to wait for the project to end, go to the east coast to inquire about Abba's whereabouts, and he was thinking about Juzha. Alan coolly suggested that all Chinese workers should leave. This place is not meant for the Orientals who do not go to church to worship. According to Gunma and Alan's theory, Many Westerners can be seen in China making a fortune. So why can't the Chinese come and earn a living here? The land here is also not written with anyone's name. The land originally belonged to the Native Americans. He mentioned the son of the chief and the killings. The arguments went on and they almost went on fighting, and the engineers had to pull them apart. The chief engineers of the Central Pacific Railroad and the Union Pacific Railroad made a bet that their workers were the best. Oliver asked Gamal to organize the workers to accept the competition. Although this would be extremely hard for the Chinese workers, this competition was not only a matter of gambling, but also a matter of the reputation of the Pacific Company where the Chinese workers were employed. Under the leadership of Gamal, the Central Pacific Railroad won, which made the engineers very proud. Allen laughed at them being used by the capitalists. Gamal said, "I'm so happy that we won. What else can a man like you do other than talk mean words?" After Lee Gamal nailed the last iron nail into the rails, Stanford took a gold one and nailed it again symbolically, and announced that the great railway that traverses the United States was officially closed. There were cheers at the scene, and the telegraph operator on the scene sent the good news across the United States, with big celebrations in Washington and New York. Gamal and several other representatives of the Chinese workers were invited to have dinner in the train carriage of the construction head Adolf. When the representatives of the Chinese workers entered the dining car dressed clean with long braids on their chests, the wealthy dignitaries who came from the east and west banks for the celebration all stood up and applauded. Gamal was suddenly very confident. He spoke in English that many Chinese workers lost their lives to build this railway, and now he would like to accept this honor for those who lost their lives. He was so proud of his fellow workers for building this railway. Adolf was excited that the original plan was to build in 7 years, but he did not expect that the Chinese workers were really capable and completed the construction in 4 years. Those who bought railway stocks would make a fortune. Adolf's 6-year-old daughter Mia asked Gamal curiously, "Can I touch your braids?" Gamal immediately dodged and said that his body and hair are gifts of his parents. No one else should touch. Mia insisted to touch Gamal's braids, and was stopped by Adolf. Mia asked her father, "Strange, why don't you have braids, but a beard? What do I have to wear a long skirt, and wear long pants like a man?" Adolf quickly pulled her daughter to the side and said, "What are you thinking about all day in your little brain?" When Adolf opened a gold mine, he saw that the cotton trousers worn by many gold diggers were easy to wear out. So he used material used for the tents for trousers with low waist and straight legs, tight hips, which became very popular among miners. His wife ran the canvas shop with pretty good business. After the gold rush, many areas of Jinshan on the west coast of the United States are overcrowded, especially Chinatown, where the number of Chinese has exceeded 100,000. Laundromats and dry goods stores are everywhere. Everywhere there were Chinese people carrying loads and selling fruits and vegetables along the street. Gamal rented these 3 rooms in Chinatown, 2 of which were used as restaurants, and the other house was less than 14 square meters, where Gamal and his guys were sleeping. Although it was small, Gamal set off firecrackers to celebrate the opening of TangMen restaurant in Chinatown. The guests all asked Gamal, "Isn't your surname Li? Why do you name a TangMen restaurant?" Gamal proudly said, "I'm a descendant of Li Shimin of the Tang dynasty." The guest said, "You're just joking. The Tang dynasty had passed for 1,000 years now. Who knows what kind of Tang people you are?" "I don't want to argue with you. Our Li family has more than 40 generations of genealogy records, which were kept in the ancestral house. At the time of our Tang dynasty, when all the countries came to court, they all rushed to the Chang'an city. Women at that time ate fat and could go out freely. In many restaurants, you can watch performances of singing and dancing while dining." Gamal described imagining that scene. He wished that someday his TangMen restaurant could be so popular with live music. Gamal also spent some money to advertise for TangMen in the local newspaper. His intention was not to expand the influence of the restaurant, but to make the news available to Abba, who was nowhere to be seen. As long as Abba was alive, maybe one day he would suddenly appear in front of the TangMen from somewhere and give his song a thumbs up excitedly. "Good job. You have brought honor to your ancestors." Not long after the eldest brother returned home, the third child, Li Genlong, brought Confucius, the Analects of Confucius, to Jinshan to reunite with Genma. He gave his second brother Genma a copy of Zhuangzi's Xiaoyaoyong, This is their favorite book when they went to private school. At that time, the teachers of the two often argued for Confucius and Johnson, each which was good, and every time Gema and Galang were happy to watch the fun. Gema said, "You really flatter me. I was forced by my teacher to memorize a few words of Zhuangzi's nonsense. How can I have time to read a book?" Galang said Galang read slowly. He said that Amma misses Ava so much that she had been bedridden, but fortunately the elder brother was back home and he regained strength and supports TangMen restaurant. He was about to mention his second sister-in-law, Xiufang, but Gilmore stopped him. Didn't mention it. Then asked Gilmore, "Why did you come?" "For self-improvement." Confucius said, "Learn and then know the inadequacy. Teach and then know the difficulty. If you know the inadequacy, you'll be able to reflect on yourself. If you know the difficulty, you'll be able to improve yourself." Along replied with a firm tone. It turned out that when the Gungmao brothers left their hometown, the Qing government had already launched a massive westernization movement across the country. Chinese learning as the fundamental structure, Western learning for practical use. Li Ganlong begged for his ama to agree for a study at the Cantonese Dialect Center in Guangzhou. When Galang was ready to go to the United Kingdom for further studies after a one-year study of foreign language learning, his ama was sick, so he had to go back home to take care of her. Galang tried his best to convince his eldest brother and ama to agree that he would come to Jishan, be with the second brother Gamal, see the outside world together, and then they would go home and do his filial piety. After Galang joined, he helped the second brother with the restaurant business. TangMen's business is not bad, but there is still no good news from Abba. One day the younger brother Gamal suddenly showed up in TangMen. As a young student sent by the Qing dynasty, he set out from Shanghai, crossed the Pacific Ocean by ship, and landed in Jinsha. It turned out that in 1870, with the support of Zheng Guofan and Li Hongzhang, Ronghong established the Children's Education Bureau. It was planned that from 1872 to 1879, the Qing government would send 4 groups of more than 120 students to study in the United States. Gengwang was among the first. "You must be really tired from traveling by car and boat." Gengwang mysteriously took out the engraved copy of The Story of the Stone, and with it, "I won't be tired." The 3 brothers had endless things to say since they haven't seen each other for several years. Gengwang signed up for the exam secretly. Alma only knew when the results were released. Alma would not agree with Gengwang to study abroad. "Your eldest brother just came back. You will leave. Who can take care of the restaurant business? Alma will blame me if he comes back and the 3 of you are not around. Don't you understand what Confucius said? You will not travel far from where your parents are." But Alma retorted, "Alma, you did not finish the second half of the sentence. You must have a way." Confucius emphasized that children should be filial piety to be around their parents. But he did not object to a person going out to fight when he has a legitimate and clear goal. "But you can study being around your Amma. Why do you want to go to the West? Leave your Amma behind. It's not filial." Guma said, "I am 16 years old, and I want to do justice for this country." Amma knew that he decided to go, so she had to prepare luggage for him. It is said that it is destined that the ancestors of the Li family have to do big things. Before leaving, Guma acknowledged 3 times to Amma, and then left happily. Guma had signed to do a document with the Qing government. He volunteered to study in the United States for 15 years. During this period, the government will not be responsible for any death or accidental disaster. Wherever the 3 brothers met, it was wine and poetry. Gilma, who was full of expectations for the future, passionately recites "The Story of the Yueyang Tower" by Fan Zhongwen, a poet of the Song dynasty. "Be the first to worry the woes of the people, and the last to share the wealth of the people." Gilma shook his head and recited his Zhuangzi's Xiao Yao You. "There is a fish in Beiming named Kun. It turns into a bird, and its name is Peng. Flying in anger, the water hits 3,000 miles, and the one who swings up is 90,000 miles." Gonlong calmly recited Confucius's 3 principles and 5 constants: benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and trustworthiness; kind, courteous, thrifty, loyal, honesty, and bravery. A week later, Gilmont arrived in Connecticut on the east coast of the United States on a steam train that had just passed through the North American continent and started his journey abroad. The 2 older brothers took him to the railway station, and Gilmont proudly said that this railway was built by our Chinese workers. and I also use my carpentry skills. In the past, it took half a year to travel to the East Coast, but now with the train, it only took 7 days to get there. Gamal especially envied his younger brother for being able to use the government money to take a ship, a train, and go to school. Gunlaw urged his younger brother to study hard and become a public official who works for the government in the future.